The crisp air of an Ohio autumn settled over the Dawson household as twilight descended on the quiet suburb of Columbus. Olivia Dawson pulled her scrubs tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out of her car, exhaustion clinging to her after another grueling hospital shift. The porch light glowed faintly against the darkening sky, guiding her up the steps where a small stack of mail waited. She scooped it up with one hand, her bag slipping from her shoulder with the other, and immediately noticed a thick envelope edged in gold. It looked out of place among the bills and grocery flyers, and her chest tightened before she even slid it open. Inside, the card gleamed with embossed lettering. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Dawson and Robert Carter." Olivia froze, staring at the names. Emily, her younger sister, and Robert Carter, the real estate mogul who had become a fixture in Columbus business circles. He was wealthy, ambitious, a man everyone seemed to admire. "Mom!" The shout broke her stillness. Daniel, her 7-year-old, came barreling out of the hallway, clutching a crayon drawing of a dinosaur. His face was lit up with pride. "Look what I made today. My teacher said it's my best yet." Olivia bent down, brushing his soft hair back as she smiled at the excitement in his eyes. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We'll hang it on the fridge," she said, her voice warm, though her mind was still tangled around the invitation. In the kitchen, Sophie, 10 years old and already carrying herself with the poise of someone older, sat hunched over her math homework. "Hi, Mom," she murmured, pencil scratching across the page. From the living room, her husband, Mark Dawson, loosened his tie and set down his briefcase. He glanced at the envelope in Olivia's hand. "Something interesting in the mail?" His tone was casual, but she noticed the way his eyes flicked curiously toward the gilded card. Olivia slid the invitation across the counter. "Emily's getting married. To Robert Carter." Mark let out a low whistle. "The Robert Carter? He's a big name around here. Impressive." He reached for the coffee maker, as if the news were nothing more than a conversation piece. Olivia nodded faintly, but her thoughts drifted far deeper. Her sister Emily had always been the bright one, the girl who could walk into any room and capture everyone's attention with her easy smile and quick wit. Olivia, older by 5 years, had been the serious one, the dependable daughter who stayed home to help, the one who became a nurse because stability mattered more than spotlight. Their parents had praised Emily often, urging Olivia to learn from her younger sister's spark. It was an old wound, one Olivia thought she had long outgrown. Yet the sharp edge of it resurfaced as she stared at the shimmering wedding invitation. Emily's life had unfolded like a polished storybook. A law degree with honors, a prestigious job at a downtown firm, and now marriage to a wealthy, respected businessman. Olivia exhaled slowly, her chest tightening. She turned toward the window, watching Daniel chase Sophie down the hall with his dinosaur drawing. Their laughter filled the house, grounding her. She had her own life, Mark, the children, the modest but comfortable home they had built in this suburb. A steady marriage, a steady career, and 2 children who gave her world meaning. That should have been enough. And yet, as the gold lettering glimmered in her hand, Olivia couldn't shake the weight pressing against her chest. She was happy for Emily, at least that was what she told herself. But beneath that polite joy lingered something harder, something she didn't want to name. It was envy, quiet and aching. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of errands and late-night calls. Olivia found herself drawn into the orbit of her sister's wedding, juggling her own shifts at the hospital with endless details Emily insisted she weigh in on. Should we go with white roses or hydrangeas for the reception? Emily's voice bubbled with excitement over the phone. "Robert says roses, but I think hydrangeas feel fresher. What do you think, Liv?" Olivia tucked the receiver between her ear and shoulder, stirring a pot of pasta for her kids. "Hydrangeas," she answered, keeping her tone even. "They'll hold up better through the night." "Perfect. I knew you'd have good instincts." Emily replied, satisfied, before launching into talk about the menu, the guest list, the seating chart. Every call carried the same rush of energy, Emily's laughter spilling through the line, her joy undeniable. Olivia listened, answered when asked, but hung up each time with a lingering heaviness in her chest. At first, the preparations were almost comforting. Choosing floral arrangements, tasting cakes, double-checking the decor for the ballroom. It was the sort of practical work Olivia had always excelled at. But with every meeting, every errand, she felt the contrast between her life and her sister's sharpen like a blade. At home, the children noticed her distraction. One evening, as she gathered her notes on the florist's order, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, coloring quietly. His head lifted suddenly, his young brow furrowed. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't like Uncle Robert." Olivia paused, surprised. "Why would you say that?" Daniel fiddled with his crayon. "He hides his phone when I'm around. Every time. Like he doesn't want me to see what he's doing." His voice was matter-of-fact, not the tone of a child spinning stories. Olivia forced a chuckle, brushing it off. "Sweetheart, Robert's just busy. Grown-ups have work calls, that's all. Don't worry about it." But Daniel only frowned, unconvinced, before returning to his drawing. Olivia turned back to her notes, though her hands felt unsteady. Meanwhile, Mark had grown distant in ways she struggled to explain. He had always worked long hours at the construction firm, but lately his absences stretched later into the night. His explanations came quickly, rehearsed. Project deadlines, client meetings, unexpected site problems. When he was home, his phone never left his side. More than once, Olivia walked into the living room to find him lowering his voice, turning away as he ended a call. "Just work," he'd mutter, slipping the phone into his pocket. She would nod, pretending to accept it, but the avoidance lingered in her mind like a splinter. At dinner, she noticed the way he avoided her gaze. The children chattered about school, Sophie excitedly describing a science project, Daniel showing off another drawing. Mark smiled, asked a question here and there, but his eyes often drifted elsewhere, as though some invisible tether was pulling him away from the table. Olivia told herself not to jump to conclusions. Marriage had its ebbs and flows. People got busy, stressed, distracted. Still, the unease built with each passing day. Late at night, lying awake in the quiet of their bedroom, she studied his silhouette beside her. Mark would turn onto his side, phone still on the nightstand, its screen lighting up briefly before he silenced it. She wanted to ask, demand even, but the words caught in her throat. Trust, she reminded herself. Trust was the foundation of everything they had built together. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a home in this neighborhood. She could not let small doubts unravel all of it. And yet, as she turned her face toward the darkened ceiling, the echo of Daniel's words returned unbidden. "He hides his phone when I'm around." Olivia closed her eyes, steadying her breath, trying to will the unease away. But deep inside, something fragile had already begun to crack. The rehearsal dinner unfolded in a warm, bustling glow inside the hotel ballroom. Strings of light draped across the ceiling, the clink of glasses blending with bursts of laughter from both families. Emily shone in the center of it all, her smile radiant as she moved from guest to guest, hand in hand with Robert, whose presence carried an air of quiet authority. Olivia sat at one of the long tables with Daniel and Sophie beside her, their plates full of food they had only half touched. Across the room, she could see her parents laughing at something Robert had said, their pride in Emily practically spilling over. Olivia straightened in her chair, reminding herself that this evening was about celebration, not comparison. Mark leaned close, his tie loosened, his hand brushing her arm briefly. "I need to step out for a bit," he said lightly. Olivia frowned. "Step out? It's the rehearsal dinner. What could be so important?" "Work," he replied, already reaching for his phone. "One of the projects got complicated. Won't take long. His tone was practiced, calm, almost dismissive. Before she could press him further, he kissed her cheek quickly and slipped away into the crowd. She watched him weave through the guests until he disappeared beyond the ballroom doors. Her chest tightened with something sharp and uneasy. Around her, laughter carried on, oblivious to the weight pressing down on her. Daniel sat quietly beside her, poking at the meatballs on his plate. His small face was more serious than usual, his brow furrowed as if something heavy lingered on his mind. Finally, he tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "is Uncle Robert a good man?" Olivia turned to him, startled. "Of course he is," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Why would you ask that?" Daniel shrugged, his eyes downcast. I'm not sure. Something feels off." His words were tentative, but carried a conviction too steady for a child his age. Olivia reached to smooth his hair, her hand trembling slightly. "Don't worry about things like that, sweetheart. Grown-up stuff isn't for you to carry." She wanted to reassure him, to wave away the worry that had been steadily gnawing at her own heart. But the look in Daniel's eyes lingered, heavy and unsettling, long after he returned to his food. When the dinner ended, and the families parted ways with hugs and promises of tomorrow, Olivia gathered the children and made her way back to the hotel suite reserved for them. Sophie fell asleep quickly, curled under the covers with her tablet slipping from her hand. Daniel, though, stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, restless in the unfamiliar room. "Try to sleep, sweetheart," Olivia whispered, tucking the blanket around him. "When's Dad coming back?" he asked softly. "Soon," she said, though she had no idea if it was true. Hours later, the door finally opened. Mark slipped inside, loosening his tie, his face shadowed with fatigue. "Sorry," he murmured, avoiding her eyes. Things took longer than expected. Olivia studied him in the dim light of the room, her voice low. "What things?" "Work," he repeated almost too quickly. "Just work." He moved toward the bathroom, brushing past her as though the conversation were already over. She stood there, motionless, the distance between them suddenly wider than the space of the room. For years she had told herself that stability was what mattered, that their marriage, their family, their home, all of it was built on trust and endurance. But in that moment, watching his back retreat into the shadows, she felt the fracture widening, undeniable and cold. In the silence that followed, Olivia lay awake beside her husband, his steady breathing betraying nothing, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, the sound of her children sleeping faint in the background. The night before her sister's wedding should have been full of joy and anticipation. Instead, it was heavy with doubt, and the quiet realization that her marriage no longer felt like the safe place it once had been. The grand ballroom of the Columbus Hotel gleamed under chandeliers, every table draped in white linens, every centerpiece a careful arrangement of hydrangeas and roses. The hum of conversation filled the air, soft music weaving through the clatter of glasses and footsteps on polished marble. It was a day that seemed pulled straight from a magazine, a picture-perfect celebration of love. Emily was radiant, a vision in lace and silk, as she stood beside Robert at the altar. Her smile seemed to light the room, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that left no doubt she believed her life was falling seamlessly into place. Robert stood tall, steady, the portrait of a man proud of the future waiting for him. The vows were spoken, rings exchanged, and the applause that followed thundered like a wave. From her place as a bridesmaid, Olivia tried to mirror the happiness swirling around her. She smiled, clapped, even wiped at her eyes when Emily walked down the aisle, though the tears were more from pressure than pure emotion. She wanted to be present, to let her sister have her perfect day without a shadow crossing it. But no matter how hard she tried, something gnawed at her from beneath the surface. Her eyes caught Mark's across the room. He was seated a few rows back during the ceremony, his posture casual. But when Emily's gaze flickered toward him, Olivia noticed it. A spark fleeting yet unmistakable. A look that lingered half a beat too long. A subtle curve of his lips, as though sharing a secret no one else could see. Olivia's stomach tightened. She blinked hard, telling herself it was her imagination. Weddings were emotional, after all. People smiled, people cried. But as the ceremony shifted to the reception, her unease only deepened. At the banquet hall, laughter and toasts flowed freely. Sophie played near the dessert table with cousins, but Daniel stayed unusually quiet, his small hands wrapped around her phone. He lifted it only when he thought no one was watching, the glow of the screen lighting his serious young face. Olivia leaned down. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she whispered. He looked up quickly, guilt flashing in his eyes. "Nothing, Mom. Just watching." He lowered the phone, but not before Olivia noticed the red record light flickering at the corner of the screen. She wanted to press him, but the moment was swept away by another cheer as Emily and Robert entered the room. Guests rose, clapping, glasses lifted high. Olivia forced herself to join, though her pulse thudded uncomfortably in her ears. As the evening unfolded, she drifted through conversations, accepting polite compliments on her dress, nodding along to jokes she barely heard. Yet her gaze returned again and again to Mark and Emily. The way his eyes seemed to track her sister's movements, the way Emily's laughter softened when it was directed at him. Small things, subtle things, but to Olivia, they blazed like fire in the shadows. Later, slipping away from the table to clear her head, Olivia wandered into the quieter hallway outside the ballroom. The murmur of voices floated from around the corner. She slowed, her breath catching as she recognized them. Mark's voice, low and intimate. Emily's answering in a whisper. Olivia edged closer, careful not to make a sound. When she turned the corner, the sight hit her like a blow. Mark was standing close, his hand brushing against Emily's, his body angled toward hers with a familiarity that spoke volumes. Emily looked up at him, her face soft, her expression one Olivia had seen only in moments of closeness between lovers. Olivia froze. The walls seemed to tilt around her, the music from the ballroom muffled and far away. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, the truth standing raw before her eyes. Mark shifted slightly, pulling his hand back as if aware of the risk of being caught. Emily glanced around, smoothing her dress, her face composed once more. They separated quickly, each heading in a different direction. Olivia pressed her palm against the cool wall, forcing air into her lungs. She wanted to scream, to confront them both right then and there. But the sound of laughter swelled from the ballroom, the wedding toasts continuing without pause. This was Emily's day, and for now, Olivia swallowed the storm inside her, choosing silence over destruction, at least for the moment. The reception was in full swing, laughter spilling across the ballroom as glasses clinked and music filled the air. Guests raised toasts to Emily and Robert, their voices blending into a chorus of celebration. Olivia sat stiffly at her table, her smile practiced, her eyes scanning the room more than once, always catching sight of Mark or Emily in the crowd. Daniel had grown unusually quiet beside her. His small hands fidgeted in his lap, his face tight with something far older than his years. Suddenly, he leaned closer, tugging at her sleeve with an urgency that made her chest tighten. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise, "we have to leave. Right now." Olivia's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, sweetheart? We can't just walk out." Daniel shook his head, his eyes wide and glistening. He thrust her phone into her hand. "Look." Olivia glanced down, confusion cutting through her fatigue. Then her blood ran cold. On the screen were photographs. Mark and Emily. Not from tonight, but from days, weeks, months past. Her husband with his arm around her sister. Their faces close, their bodies leaning into each other in ways that left nothing to interpretation. In one, they were seated in a car, Mark's hand against Emily's knee. In another, they embraced in a dimly lit hallway. Her throat constricted. She scrolled, her fingers trembling, until the pictures gave way to words, messages, each one more damning than the last. Meet me tonight. I told Robert the first had a meeting. Can't wait to see you. Another. You're the only one who understands me. Her chest tightened, so hard she thought she might faint. Daniel's voice wavered as he spoke, tears spilling down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to snoop. Dad left his tablet open once and I saw messages. So I checked his phone. I knew he was hiding something. I had to know. I had to show you. Olivia's vision blurred. She pulled her son into her arms, holding him against her, her heart breaking not only for herself, but for the innocence stripped from him too soon. Shoot, baby, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his hair. You did nothing wrong. You were brave. You helped me see the truth. He sniffled, clutching her tightly. I didn't want you to be hurt, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears, a sickening mix of fury and devastation. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, every late night, every excuse, every small moment of doubt. Suddenly, it all fell into place with brutal clarity. Her sister, her husband, betrayal layered upon betrayal, ripping away the foundations of her life in a single instant. Around her, guests laughed, oblivious to the earthquake beneath her skin. Emily, glowing in her gown, posed for pictures, Robert beaming beside her. Mark mingled freely, his smile easy, his lies woven seamlessly into the night. Olivia straightened slowly, still clutching Daniel's small hand in hers. Her body trembled, but her mind had already begun to crystallize with a single thought. She could not let this secret rot inside her. Robert deserved to know. She met Daniel's tearful eyes and nodded, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. Thank you for trusting me, sweetheart. You were right to show me, and now it's my turn to do the right thing. Daniel's lips quivered. What are you going to do, Mom? Olivia looked across the ballroom, her gaze landing on Robert Carter, the man celebrating what he thought was the happiest day of his life. Her grip on Daniel's hand tightened. I'm going to tell him the truth, she said quietly. And in that moment, Olivia Dawson knew there was no turning back. The ballroom pulsed with music and laughter, but Olivia's world had gone eerily quiet. Her grip on Daniel's hand was firm as she guided him through the crowd, weaving between tables until the cool night air of the hotel garden embraced them. Fairy lights twinkled in the hedges, their glow soft against the darkness. Robert stood near a fountain, speaking with a pair of business associates. He noticed Olivia's pale face immediately, excused himself, and walked toward her with a frown. Olivia, is something wrong? He asked, concern flickering in his eyes. She nodded faintly, her throat dry. We need to talk. Privately. Robert's gaze shifted to Daniel, who clung to her side, his small fingers still wrapped tightly around her own. Olivia drew in a steadying breath, then held out the phone. You deserve to see this. Robert hesitated, confusion shadowing his features, then took the phone. As he scrolled through the images, his expression changed, confusion giving way to realization, then to raw pain. The photos, the messages, the undeniable proof of betrayal stared back at him. His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiffened, but it was his eyes that revealed the devastation. How long? He rasped, his voice breaking. Olivia shook her head. I don't know. Long enough. Robert's hand trembled as he continued to scroll, reading words not meant for his eyes, plans made in secrecy, lies woven into their lives. He closed the phone slowly, as though it carried a weight too heavy to hold. His breath shuddered. I suspected. She was always deleting messages, always making excuses. But I didn't want to believe it. Not until now. Daniel's small voice cut into the silence. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I didn't mean to find it, but I thought you should know. Robert looked down at him, his expression softening for just a moment. He bent slightly, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're braver than most adults, Daniel. Thank you for telling the truth." Before Olivia could respond, footsteps approached. Emily appeared first, her gown sweeping across the stone path, her eyes narrowing at the sight of them together. Mark was only a step behind her, his face tightening when he saw Robert holding the phone. "What's going on out here?" Emily demanded, her voice unsteady. Robert's voice was cold as steel. He held up the phone, the damning evidence illuminated in the glow of the garden lights. "The truth has a way of finding its way out, even tonight." Emily's face drained of color. "Robert, wait, it's not what you think." Mark stepped forward quickly, his voice rushed. "She's right. This isn't what it looks like. You've got it wrong." "Enough." Olivia's voice cut through, sharper than she'd ever heard it before. Her body trembled, but her words carried a clarity that left no room for denial. "Don't you dare stand there and lie. 15 years, Mark. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and this is what you've done. With my sister." Emily's lips quivered, and for the first time that night, tears welled in her eyes. I never meant for it to go this far. I was always in your shadow, Olivia. Mom and Dad were proud of you. You had the family, the home, everything I wanted. And Mark, he understood me. He saw me." Olivia let out a bitter laugh, hollow and sharp. "So you took what wasn't yours? That's not love, Emily. That's betrayal." Robert's face hardened, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "This wedding is over. I won't build a life on lies. Not with you." He let the phone drop back into Olivia's hand as if it burned him. Emily gasped, reaching for him. "Please, Robert, listen." But he turned away, his posture rigid, his heart closed. Mark's eyes darted to Olivia. "We can fix this, Liv. For the kids, for everything we've built." Her response came without hesitation. "There is nothing left to fix. Our marriage is over. For the children's sake, leave quietly and never ask me to look at you the same way again." Daniel clutched her hand tighter, his eyes glistening as he looked up at his mother. Olivia straightened, her grip firm, her resolve unshaken. Without another word, she turned, guiding Daniel back toward the hotel. Behind them, the garden erupted in chaos. Emily sobbing, Robert speaking in clipped tones, Mark's voice rising in desperation. But Olivia didn't look back. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly into the night, a cruel echo of the celebration that had just collapsed. Olivia walked on, her son at her side, leaving behind the wreckage of deceit and stepping into the uncertain future with only one certainty. She would not stay silent anymore. 6 months later, the rhythm of Olivia Dawson's life had changed entirely. The divorce papers were signed, the court dates behind her, and the echoes of that disastrous wedding night had faded into memory. What remained was quieter, smaller, but hers. The modest house she had rented sat on a quiet street outside Columbus, its siding plain, its yard in need of care. To Olivia, it felt like freedom. On moving day, Daniel and Sophie had raced through the empty rooms, their voices bouncing off the bare walls. Daniel chose the smaller bedroom at the back, insisting it was his fortress. Sophie claimed the one with the bigger window, already planning where her desk would go. Olivia stood in the doorway of her own room, boxes stacked at her feet, and let herself breathe. The house wasn't perfect, but it was safe, and safety was enough. Her new job as a family counselor had come almost by accident. She had stumbled upon the posting at a community center while searching for part-time work, unsure what she was capable of beyond nursing. In the interview, she spoke openly about her own journey, about betrayal, resilience, and the fight to rebuild stability for her children. To her surprise, the director leaned forward and said, "That's exactly why we need you. You understand what people are going through. You can help them heal." Now, Olivia spent her mornings meeting with clients, parents struggling through separation, children caught in the crossfire of conflict, women learning to stand on their own again. She listened, offered guidance, and drew from the deepest parts of her own pain to show them there was a way forward. For the first time in years, her work didn't just pay the bills, it gave her life a sense of purpose. At home, Daniel and Sophie slowly adjusted to their new normal. At first, there had been questions. Why doesn't Dad live with us? Why do we see him only every other weekend? But Olivia answered gently, never speaking ill of Mark, never placing the burden on their small shoulders. Over time, the questions quieted, replaced by laughter, homework sessions at the kitchen table, and movie nights curled on the couch. Daniel grew calmer, the anxious edge that once shadowed him fading as the months passed. He planted an apple sapling in the backyard, proudly announcing it would grow as they grew, a symbol of their fresh start. Sophie thrived at school, her drawings covering the refrigerator, her bright voice filling the house each morning before the bus arrived. For Olivia, the hardest moments came at night when the house was still. She would sit by the window, the hum of the neighborhood fading into silence, and trace the band on her finger where a ring used to rest. 15 years of her life had unraveled, and sometimes the weight of that loss threatened to crush her. But then she would think of her children sleeping safely in their rooms, their breaths steady and peaceful, and she knew she had made the only choice possible. Being a single mother was not easy. There were bills to stretch, meals to plan, schedules to balance. But each day Olivia discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed. She found herself laughing again, her shoulders lighter, her voice steadier. The shadow of betrayal no longer defined her. Instead, it became the fuel that pushed her forward. On a late afternoon in early spring, Olivia sat on the porch steps with a mug of tea, watching Daniel chase Sophie across the yard. Their laughter rose into the air, clear and unburdened. She felt the corners of her lips lift into a smile. Small, but genuine. The life she had now was not the one she had imagined years ago, but it was real. It was hers. And slowly, piece by piece, Olivia Dawson was coming back to herself. The first snow of December dusted the neighborhood in white. The streets hushed beneath a blanket of quiet. Olivia's house glowed softly from within, the living room warm with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Daniel and Sophie had dragged a tree through the front door earlier that week, laughing as they tried to balance it upright while Olivia steadied the base. Now, boxes of ornaments sat open on the carpet, ready to be unpacked. There was a knock at the door. Olivia brushed her hands against her sweater and opened it to find Robert standing there, a potted poinsettia cradled in his arms. "Housewarming gift," he said with a small smile. "Or maybe holiday cheer. Either way, I thought you could use it." Olivia stepped aside, touched by the gesture. "Come in. The kids will be glad to see you." Robert set the plant on the coffee table, his eyes taking in the glow of the tree lights. The children sprawled on the floor, stringing garlands. Daniel jumped up to greet him, Sophie close behind. They peppered him with questions about the poinsettia, about his dog, about whether he would stay for hot cocoa. Olivia watched them with quiet gratitude. What had started as an awkward visit months ago had grown into something steady. Robert had been broken too, humiliated and blindsided on the very day meant to be his new beginning. But instead of turning bitter, he had chosen to move forward. Over time, that resilience had mirrored her own, and between them, an easy friendship had formed. Not romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but companionship rooted in shared pain and the understanding that healing takes time. Through him, Olivia had been reminded that her story did not end with betrayal. It was still unfolding, and she had a hand in shaping every page. News of Mark and Emily reached her in fragments, through mutual acquaintances, through whispers that trickled across town. The marriage between them, if it could even be called that, had unraveled quickly. They had splintered under the very weight of the lies that had bound them together. Emily left Columbus not long after, chasing another job in another city. Mark was seen with a different woman on his arm, the details irrelevant, the pattern predictable. Olivia didn't ask for updates. She didn't care. The man who had once been her husband, the sister who had once been her confidant, they no longer held power over her. They were not chapters she wished to reopen. Still, one evening near the end of the year, the past arrived at her doorstep. It was New Year's Eve, the house alive with the crackle of laughter as Daniel and Sophie hung the last ornaments. A knock echoed against the winter night, and when Olivia opened the door, Emily stood there. Her sister looked thinner, her once bright eyes dimmed with fatigue. "Olivia," Emily said softly, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve this, but I came to ask for forgiveness." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound the muffled laughter of children inside and the faint whistle of the wind. Olivia studied her sister's face, the woman who had wounded her more deeply than anyone else could. She felt no rush of anger, no flood of sorrow, only a cool, settled calm. "I don't hate you," Olivia said at last, her voice steady, "but you are no longer part of my life." Emily's lips parted, her eyes filling with tears. She nodded once, as though she had expected nothing less, and stepped back into the snow. Olivia closed the door gently, her heart neither lighter nor heavier, only free. Inside, Daniel was looping tinsel around Sophie, both of them laughing so hard they tumbled onto the rug. Olivia joined them by the tree, adjusting an ornament, her fingers brushing the rough bark of the trunk. The lights flickered across their faces, filling the room with a glow that felt almost sacred. For the first time in a long time, Olivia's smile came easily. Not because anyone had returned, not because the past had been mended, but because she had chosen to move forward. She had chosen healing, chosen her children, chosen herself. Outside, fireworks cracked faintly in the distance, welcoming the new year. Inside, Olivia Dawson stood in the light of her own making, knowing that some wounds did not need forgiveness to close. Sometimes the greatest strength was found in letting go and building a life from the ruins. Not every wound requires forgiveness to heal. Sometimes the truest strength lies in letting go, in choosing to heal, and in rebuilding a life from the wreckage.